Gata for the sound of the bell. Mind calm, body at ease, breathing quiet, sentiment benevolent. Dharma friends sitting still in vital silence, wanting nothing, we practice eco-Buddhism together. The sound of the temple bell booms for all to cease from conflict. May the way of Buddha usher in the dawn of non-violent global village forever. Here is the after sound of the bell. Thunder of silence, light after Dharma rain. Amoga Varochana Mahamudra Manipadme Jvala Pravartaya
Please stand for the chanting of the refuges. Sing, Queen Shikon, Sundsy Sept, Sanju
Sim Quignone Simon Sunse Chemang Chale Sangju Ilche Dhamaya Chisim Quignone Sibam Samse Chemang Chale Sangju Ilche Sangaya
And the English translation. I go for refuge to the Buddha
I go for refuge to the Buddha
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment
and realize the great way.
and realize the great way.
I go for refuge to the Dharma
I go for refuge to the Dharma
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will penetrate the teachings
I will penetrate the teachings
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
I go for refuge to the Sangha
I go for refuge to the Sangha
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many
I will seek peace and happiness for the many
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
Could you please return now to your places for 5 more minutes of meditation, knowing that what you've done before this will help with your deepening of meditation practice in these 5 minutes. And if you're just joining us, take your beginner's mind into your meditation practice, being fully present with each moment, especially in relation to the body senses, the sounds, the sights, the senses of the way the skin feels. Here in our meditation hall, the doors are open, so we can actually feel the breeze come in a little bit. Okay. And then after these 5 minutes, Hayun will be giving a talk this morning on anger. So I will change seats with her now.
Follow along with these simple, mindful stretching exercises. So, welcome in from the 10 directions, everyone, to the Zen Buddhist temple in Ann Arbor, where we are experiencing a little Indian summer here. It's very, very warm and beautiful, and it feels like a summer day, even though it's the end of September. So, Haju Sunim is correct. I am taking on a really serious topic today that I know has really bothered a lot of us in recent days and weeks, and that is the topic of anger. It is the fifth of our hindrances that we've been covering. And before we start, I think it's important just to center ourselves. And I'd like to do a version of the 3 refuges that has been very meaningful to me over the years. There's so many beautiful versions, including the formal one that we just did. But I'd like you to follow along with this one because it's, I think, sets a good tone for our discussion today. So just repeat after me. Hands in Hapchang of sincere heart. I go for refuge to the Buddha,
I go for refuge to the Buddha,
my deeply awakened mind.
My deeply awakened mind.
May I take refuge in the Buddha.
May I take refuge in the Buddha.
Make a little bow. I go for refuge to the Dharma,
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
truth manifesting everywhere.
Truth manifesting everywhere.
I go for, may I take refuge in the Dharma.
May I take refuge in the Dharma.
I go for refuge to the Sangha,
I go for refuge to the Sangha,
the community of all living beings.
the community of all living beings.
May I take refuge in the Sangha.
May I take refuge in the Sangha.
Okay, so I'm going to hold up our little 5 hindrances chart here. We've gone through several of them. We've gone through desire and greed. Haji Sunim talked about that. We've gone through sloth and torpor. Kusat spoke about that. Long ago, it seems, I spoke about restlessness and worry, and Ma'un spoke about uncertainty and doubt. So what's left is the second hindrance, which is ill will and aversion and anger. It's kind of the big kahuna of hindrances these days, isn't it? Remember when we spoke about this initially, the hindrances, and I described them, the scripture talks about our practice and our lives being this beautiful container that is so still that we can actually see to the bottom of clearly, and we can see our own reflection at some point. But the Buddha described that when we have anger and when we have ill will, that container is like boiling over. It is so hot, so it's impossible to see clearly. It's impossible to see with our clear minds. And so, we have to deal with it, but it's not easy, and it's not easy for me either. And that's why I really am appreciative of being able to have this Dharma talk and sharing it with you. There's no doubt that anger stems from our fears, fears of what the world may become, fears of what our lives may become, or just fear of how we progress along our path. It's universal. We may think it's all about ourselves, but it's really not about just us. It's something that every human being has to live with and deal with. And so often we look at anger as good, bad. I'm being angry, so therefore I am bad. And so we present ill will even upon ourselves because we think of ourselves as unworthy or of worse human beings because we're experiencing anger. But so what I'm going to try to talk about today is the range of anger, because in Buddhism, we don't like to look at things as sort of the dualities of good and bad or evil and righteous, but to really try to look at the subtlety of these emotions, especially big emotions like anger, and what are the different aspects of them and what are the different facets of them, because there are so many. Last week, I was asked to make coffee here at the temple, and I don't drink coffee, so I did not know to put a filter in the coffee pot. So grounds went everywhere, boiling coffee, boiling water went everywhere, and it was kind of a mess, but it was a really minor irritation. In those instances, there's nothing a little colorful language and looking at yourself with humor can handle. But the other extreme of anger is really where it gets into the danger zone. And that is when we start feeling hatred toward an individual or to a group of people. And so, but within that is a very wide range. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about today is how to pull ourselves back, perhaps, if we're feeling some of those feelings. I've been a big fan of Buddhist iconography, but lately I have been really into looking at the iconography that is depicted as like gruesome, grimacing, angry creatures. Most of it obviously are, peaceful iconography of images meditating or doing kind things. But then there are these crazy images that are just bursting with flames and anger. And lately I've been really into them. So some of them are what we call Dharma guardians or Dharma protectors. And Haju Sunim was saying that when she went to Korea, oftentimes outside of the temples there, they have these sort of gruesome creatures that are snarling and grimacing. And she said that those are actually to scare the defilements right out of you. That's one of the reasons they're doing that grimacing and snarling. And the other reason that these creatures do this, which is very endearing, is that they are really protecting us. They want to protect our practice. And so they don't want anything to get in the way. And so they're really our protectors. And I really love that image of these sort of snarling creatures. One of them, my favorite, is called Achala. And he is this blue monster, totally blue, bright blue from head to toe. He has these bulging eyes. He's sitting on a rock. There are flames coming out from behind him. So there's a lot of anger here with Achala. And he's even got fangs. So he's got big fangs coming this way and that way. So I guess if I need a protector, Achala would be a really, really good protector. And, I like the wrathfulness. And it really, somehow I identify it with it at this point in my life. Not only do I need that protection, but I kind of identify with that wrathfulness. I have to tell you. So the other iconography that I want to talk about are the bodhisattvas. So, these are archetypes. They're sort of embodiments of the ideals that we can aspire to. And the bodhisattva I want to talk about is Kwanseum Posal, aka Avalokiteshvara. And she is one of the best known bodhisattvas. She's the bodhisattva of great compassion. But she has an interesting story. So here's Kwanseum Posal next to me. You can see she has a lot of hands. And in some places she has a lot of eyes and a lot of heads. But not all of them are nice. She obviously is the star of the Heart Sutra. And she is one of the most revered bodhisattvas in our tradition. So the story of Kwanseum Posal is at one point, she looked out over the entire world and her heart broke with compassion. So she made a vow that she would always look out for and protect all beings with her compassion. And she felt it so deeply. As she was taking her vows and doing what she needed to do and look down, she looked back up at the world. She saw that things didn't get better. And in fact, there was more suffering, more pain. And at that moment, she had vowed, part of her vow, which was really, really a serious vow. I don't know whether I could take this kind of vow, was that if she ever backslid in her commitment, her head would break into 100 pieces. So at that moment, she looked up and there was more suffering. She had a moment of doubt. And she looked down and she said, maybe I just need to work on saving myself. I can't possibly save all these beings. I can't possibly offer compassion and protection to them. At that moment, what happened? Her head broke into 100 pieces. Well, wasn't a good scene. So it took a Buddha, Amitabha Buddha, to come in and repair Kwanseum Posal. So he put her together, and she asked at this time to be able to really have compassion for every being, that she be given 1,000 arms, and she be given 1,000 eyes, so that she could see in every corner of the world. And to top it off, Amitabha Buddha gave her 11 heads. And most of the heads of Kwanseum Posal are very calm, loving, compassionate, but there is one head that's totally wrathful, and it's got its tongue out and it's snarling. And the legend has it that at some point, that energy is necessary to protect and save all beings. So what Kwanseum Posal embodies is that sometimes anger is not necessarily bad versus good. Sometimes it's necessary, but it's necessary to be very, very skillful about how we embody it and how we use our anger. So my experience with anger, you look at me in this robe, and you look at me meditating, you probably say to yourself, well, there's a really peaceful person. Not always so. As most of the people I know can attest, I sometimes have these moments where I'm, less the peaceful person and more prone to anger. Last Sunday was one example. I was here at the temple, and we were having sort of a breakfast discussion, and I had just seen pictures in the New York Times of people really crying and mourning in New York and Washington over the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's behind me here in the altar. And I was really upset. And so something, just an innocent comment was made, and I just burst out crying. And I just said, it's not unimportant. It's really important to me. It's really important. And it became I, my. And it basically became, in a nutshell, the world is not going the way I would like it to. And I'm really mad. And so I have a picture that I think represents where I have been, and it might represent you too. This is my friend Lucy. We all know Lucy from Peanuts. So the thing about Lucy that I really love in this is that you obviously see the little bubble above her, which is just filled with tangle or scribble. And it's hard for Lucy to let anything good in when it's just a mass of scribble. But the other thing that I really like about Lucy and I really identify with is you see the energy here. So it's obviously an energy that can be really turned to something very positive. Yeah, I love Lucy. I figured if I ever stay for any length of time here at the temple, I should hang her up on outside my door so that people know not to come in if I have the Lucy picture up. But it's hard to step away from anger. But I think that what I really looked at are people who can explain how to negotiate that anger, how to transform that anger. So one bodhisattva that we all really love, such a bodhisattva, is the great poet Maya Angelou. And she wrote about anger, and I wanted to read you what she said. She said, "You should be angry, but you must not be bitter. Bitterness is like a cancer. It eats upon the host. It doesn't do anything to the object of its displeasure. So use that anger. You write it. You dance it. You march it. You vote it. You do everything about it. You sing it. You talk it. You never stop talking it." So I thought now it might be fun to do a little of that singing with it. We do a precious sound practice called chanting here at the temple. Many of you are well informed about chanting. So this is a very simple chant that I want to do together, and it is Kwanseum Posal chanting. So it's chanting our deep compassion. But I want to make sure that as we do this chanting, that we're not doing it like from a very demure way, but that we're really throwing our hearts into it. And if you feel like you're in a sense of mourning now, throw that mourning into it because you'll really feel it. If you have, if you've been kind of angry with the world, with, our inability to see each other, politics, whatever it is, I urge you to just throw yourself in, because remember, with chanting, the more voices, the better, and the more out of tune voices, the better. So if you feel self-conscious, close the door to your room or go outside, and we'll just chant together. So just follow along. You'll see it only has the words Kwanzaa and Posal, so it's pretty simple. Kwanzaa Posal, 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 Kwanzaa we did Maya Angelou and Kwanzaa Posao rather proud. So I wanted to talk also about negotiating that anger, as opposed to just celebrating it, how we kind of bring it down, can bring down the temperature, bring down the volume when it gets to be really angry. The Dalai Lama wrote a fantastic book called Be Angry. And I really liked it. I like those titles because it tells me how to negotiate my anger and transform it, not just about suppressing it, which is not something that's at all good for me. He talks about two kinds of anger. He talks about one kind of anger, which is compassionate anger. So it's the anger that a parent might show a child if a child did something reckless that would be bad for it, because you need to teach a lesson that will stick, that the child remembers. And so at that point, anger might be warranted. Certainly, if we feel strongly about social justice issues, feeling anger about social justice issues is really important. In fact, history shows it's the only way that gets things done. Nonviolent, angry protests are sometimes really important and really show society that there needs to be change. So those are two kinds of anger that are really effective when they're done in a nonviolent way. The second anger, though, is the anger that contains hatred. And it's usually hatred toward one individual or one group of people. And it's so easy, it's such a slippery slope to let our anger flow into that. And it usually goes that sort of route of things aren't going the way I like and it's your fault, or it's this group's fault, or, it's not about proactive change. It's really about directing that anger to a specific person. So easy to do these days when you watch the news. But that's what the Dalai Lama says to try to really negotiate with and try to examine in yourself, is when that starts arising. Just as anger isn't good or evil in itself, people are not good or evil only. All of us have some degree of good and evil in us. And so we all have to work with that. And so the Dalai Lama talked in this book about his experience with Tibetans who were expatriates who had escaped. They were refugees. And those were his people. Obviously, the Dalai Lama lived in the Potala Palace in Lhasa. And for the Tibetan people, their Buddhism was really their religion and their government. So when he had to flee, there's been anger and suffering and pain for the people who lived there for many years now. So he meets with them when they come back regularly, when they come to his center in India. They tell atrocious stories about how they were treated. And he can be right there with his anger about their situation and his compassion about what they're going through. But he's able to have an equanimity that he knows that human beings are going to experience this. Human beings are going to be cruel to each other. But we can't let that cruelty bring ourselves down, that we have to really work at being above the cruelty and keeping ourselves above that miasma of cruelty that exists. And that's where our practice comes in. And so I've been thinking a lot about what I can do with my deep emotions. And one of the things that's so important for me, it's really hard when you see the bubble with Lucy, the thought bubble where it's all scribble. It's so hard to let a pause go in because the only thing I want to do is respond and respond in an angry way. But the times when I have stepped back and allowed myself just a deep pause, I've been better for it because I then respond with some degree of skillful means as opposed to the sort of scribble thought bubble that's filling my head. Because if I can just step back a little and pause, I can see that the world is more complex. that the actions were more complex, and that my anger is too simplistic to address it. So that deep pause we have in our 6 right livelihood guidelines. The second one is pause, breathe, and listen. And so when I'm feeling angry these days, I try to take those words to heart, to pause, to breathe, and to listen. Because usually angry words from others are spoken also out of a sense of fear. So we maybe can create the space to address that fear and anger in a compassionate way, as opposed to meeting anger with anger. The Buddha talked about anger being just this spiral. And I don't know about you, but I feel that a lot of the time, that when I get on this angry spiral, it's so hard to get myself out of it. It's really, really hard. What the Buddha also said, kind of you'd expect, well, sitting meditation is the key. Well, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's so important. Of course, it's important to have that as part of our practice. But the Buddha also talked about the need for good friends and wholesome conversation. So last week, when I was at the temple and I was getting just angrier and angrier because I felt like nobody was meeting me at my level in terms of my strong emotions, what it really took was for me to talk to a friend about my situation and how I was feeling. And it was a friend who didn't take me down further, because there are friends who can do that, who can say, you're absolutely right to be so angry, I'm furious, and we get each other. We're almost both on the cycle together. But that sort of friend that can pause and help. I remember a story when I was very young. Of course, this constant anger for me was that my brother was being treated differently than me, that he was given much more freedom and that I had much more responsibility. And it was always me, me, me. I was always the one who had to do more and didn't get to have as much fun. So I went to my grandma's house, which was across the street from ours. I grew up in a farmhouse, and we were both there together, my Nana and I. And I just was so angry at my mom and dad because my brother seemed to have more freedom than I did. And what she did was she had baked an apple pie for dessert that night. So that afternoon, we both sat at the table and just ate a piece of pie together. And she listened to me and didn't really say much. And I think, the conversation might have gone to how the Tigers were doing that season or something, because she was a big Tigers fan of baseball, and so was I. So I thought of it yesterday, that how skillfully she handled my anger and diffused it and brought me to a place where I was happy. And certainly the pie didn't hurt, but I think that probably it was her skillful means that kept me there. And in these days, especially with those of us who aren't around a lot of people because of COVID, we have to kind of develop that for ourselves. And so that is about breathing. It's about seeking out good friends and communicating with good friends. Part of that can happen at the temple. We have every Saturday morning a work practice. If you feel like you just need to get out some energy, come to work practice here at the temple from 9 to 12 on Saturdays. You're outside, you've got shovel in hand or rake, and you're really working with it in a very physical way. The other thing is we have a practice period. And it's every Sunday after this service. You can join with some other people and really dig into some Buddhist scripture and talk about your practice and communicate. Developing those good friendships that are really wholesome is a part of that fabric that holds us together, so that the anger doesn't just overwhelm us. And the final thing I want to mention, my little talk, is I want to get back to the little monster archetypes, the Achala, the blue monster, and the other Dharma guardians who are there to scare the defilements out of us, but also to protect our practice. There is those of you who read our e-bulletin know that I am really into the old Korean monastic poetry. And there's this one guy by the name of Naung Sunim, who is just obviously he was like the national preceptor. He was really a bigwig in Korean Buddhism around the year 1200 or so. But he also, I just really appreciate that he wore, clothes that were basically rags. What he liked most of all was going to this little decrepit hut in the woods and seeking out nature and writing beautiful poetry. If that's something that appeals to you, go for it and do that too. But one of the poems that he wrote is actually something we recite every single morning. We call it the morning prayer. And we say Naung Sunim's resolutions. So just like Kwanseum Posal made resolutions, so did Naung Sunim. And so his resolutions really were more supplicating. So I thought we could do these together. Those of you who know it can just recite it along with me. But those who do not know it, just listen very deeply to these words, because I think it's a good way to end this. And I think it really helps. And I don't think it hurts to call on the energy of the universe, these benevolent energies, to really protect us and help us. And that's what this does. So I'm going to start midway. I'm not doing the whole thing, but I'd like you to put your hands in Hapchang again one more time and do some really deep listening. And if you know it, you can recite it along with me. May all Dharma guardians protect and not forsake me. Let there be no difficulties where there are difficulties, so I may accomplish my great resolutions. May I ask that all the followers of the way of Buddha in the innumerable Dharma realms play together in the adorned land of Sugamuni Bul. That we all live happily together in the enlightened world. That we be always in the company of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. That we always enjoy the benefit of Buddha light. That we eliminate numerous karmic hindrances. That we obtain great wisdom. That finally we attain supreme enlightenment. That we help save all beings in all lands, so we may repay all the Buddhas for their loving kindness. Life after life, may we always walk the path of the Bodhisattva till all beings attain their Buddhahood. Maha Prajna Paramita. May you and I and all beings be happy. May you and I and all beings be peaceful. May you and I and all beings be enlightened. I hope this talk helped a little. It helped me to just look into it a little bit more and realize that, you know what? I've got to work with this anger. It ain't going away. So the question is, how do I dance with it? How do I sing with it? How do I transform it? So thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to hand it over to Haji Sunim for announcements.
Well, good morning, everyone, dear ones. And first, thanks to Hayun for her talk this morning. I hope it's been, at least for me, it gives me much to think about. Because certainly I come up with a little anger and irritation myself. We all do. And it's good to say these things out loud and to learn more about them. And as Hayun said, to pause. So, as she said, we have a practice period which is focused on the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And it's taking place from 12 to 1 on the next 6 or 7 Sundays. So those who've been going to the tea party, I understand many of them have entered the practice period. So we're going to be not having the tea time until after the practice period is finished. So that's the first one. And then the second one is that we used to have regular meetings of a group called Mindful Transitions, which is to discuss, the impermanence really in our lives, in all of its manifestations. And some of the folks from that group have been talking about getting together again and regularly meeting to continue their Dharma discussions. So if that's of interest for you, then please contact the temple by email or phone, and we'll put you in touch with Pomryok Peter Beyer, who has been the coordinator along with a couple of other folks of that valuable group. So call the temple or email if you're interested in being a part of the mindful transitions. It seems like being part of some Dharma group is an important thing to do these days. Yeah. Third thing is we've got to the end of the month to be going up to Burns Park for morning practice. And what a pleasure it was this morning. We got to celebrate the birthday of Jajak, who often arrives to practice with us. So if you see Jajak in the next few days, give her a happy birthday. And then we haven't got a schedule for what we'll be doing when the weather gets really cold back here, but we'll let you know. Keep reading the e-bulletin and listen to the announcements at the ends of these services. Of course, as Hayun mentioned, each Saturday, we appreciate those of you who can come and help with the work practice. There's everything from raking leaves from the ground and raking them out of the pond, and just doing a lot of things around the temple in preparation for the colder weather. Okay. Say it again.
4 great vows.
Oh. Yeah, I am growing forgetful. We always end with the 4 great vows. So please repeat after me or just simply listen. all beings, one body,
all beings, one body,
I vow to liberate.
I vow to liberate.
Blind passions, one root,
Blind passions, one root,
I vow to penetrate.
I vow to penetrate.
I forget the next
Dharma,
one.
Dharma gates.
Dharma gates, one mind,
Dharma gates, one mind,
I vow to penetrate.
I vow to penetrate.
And the great way of Buddha,
The great way of Buddha,
I vow to realize.
I vow to realize.
And one more thing I don't want to forget is many thanks for those of you who are continuing to send financial support for the temple, and also for those of you who turn up with vegetables these days. Always appreciated. We're having squash a lot, and it's ever delicious. And thank you so much for just your kind thoughts and your participation whenever possible. It's really important. May this find you well, safe, and keeping a little practice every day. Okay.
All right.